Hey, good morning, everybody. I hope all of you can hear me. So, how is everybody here? Just give me a minute as I set up my device. Okay, so we are already at 220 people. Good morning, everybody. Morning, Chetan. Good morning, Preksha. Good morning, Abhishek. Sujan, I'm good, yeah. So, how is everybody else? Morning, Zana. Uh, Morning, Sushma. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's nice to see that all of you are doing well. And I think that all of you have your MT coming up this Sunday, right? If I'm not wrong. So I hope all of you are preparing well for it, right? Your portion for MT5 will be your entire 11th class syllabus. So I hope that all of you are preparing well for it. Okay, check it. Just give me a minute. Second. Okay, I think we are all set now. Okay, chicken. So then let's not waste any more time and let's start with the class because we are today the class is going to be slightly lengthy. Okay, I want to finish this chapter. Okay, so the last part of the chapter that we are left with is your sexual reproduction, right? So I want to finish that off today. So the class might stretch out a bit, not by much, maybe by 5-10 minutes. That's it. And I'll maintain a slightly brisk pace throughout the class. Okay, so that we can finish up the chapter in time. Morning Kirtan, good morning Ankita, good morning Varsha. Okay, okay, so on that note, let's start with the class. We're already at 242 people. We're already at 245. Okay, that's very good. Just give me a minute, guys. Okay, so we're doing reproduction in organisms. Today is our lecture number 4. Okay, which is also the final lecture of the chapter. Okay, after this, we'll start with the second chapter, which is your reproduction in plants. Okay, okay. So let's do a brief recap of what we started in previous class. In the previous class, Sukanya, just click on audio at the bottom of your phone, right? And then select device audio. You'll be able to hear me here because everybody else can hear me. So there might be some error from your side. Just check once. Okay. So yeah. So in the last class, we continued with vegetative propagation, natural methods of vegetative propagation. We finished that off, and then after that, we started with artificial method of vegetative propagation, in which we started cutting, layering, and all the other stuff, right? Grafting, bud grafting, then tissue propagation and all that stuff, right? And after that, we studied about different phases of reproductive cycle. We talked about your juvenile phase, your reproductive phase, and lastly, your senescence phase, which terminates with death, right? Okay, so today what we're going to do is we are going to talk about sexual reproduction and all things related to sexual reproduction, right? Okay, so again, as always, before we start with our class, let's just do a couple of revision questions just to see how many of you are going through the notes and the textbook on a regular basis. Okay, so the first question is on your screen now. Vegetative propagules of agave is what? What is the vegetative propagule of agave? Okay, so I'll throw up the poll in 20 seconds. I'll throw up the poll in 20 seconds. Pritesh, जरा wait कर लो बेटा. Poll आएगा फिर vote कर देना. ठीक है? Okay. So what are the vegetative propagules of agave? Your options are tuber, rhizome, bulbil, and runner. Those are the options that you guys have on your screen. Okay, we are at 265 people. That's good. Yeah, that's the most number of people we have had in a class. Okay, it's good to see that so many of you are joining. Okay, so the poll is live on your screen. Let's go. Okay, the poll is live on your screen. Let's go through it. Okay, just get your votes in as soon as possible, beta. Okay, we are at 264 people. Awesome. Love to see so many people. Okay, the poll is on your screen. Please vote. Please vote on the poll. Okay, so far 58% of you have voted. It would be very nice if the other 100 people also vote. Okay. Come on, guys, get your votes in here. Okay, 10 seconds. I'll close the poll. 10 seconds. I'll close the poll. So make sure that you get your votes in. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay, so let's stop. So out of 270 people have joined us, 196 voted. So it would be very nice if in the next question the other 70 plus people also vote. So according to majority of you, 74% of you think that option C is correct, and option C is absolutely correct. And option C is absolutely correct. If you remember, in the last class we discussed that vegetative propagules of agave is bulbil, and the special thing about vegetative propagules of agave is that it is one of the few plants in which a reproductive part of the plant is being used for vegetative propagation, right? Bulbils in agave are nothing but modified floral buds, right? So that is one exception to our definition of vegetative propagation, that in vegetative propagation, non-reproductive parts of the plant are used. Okay, okay, awesome. Let's move to the next question then. The next question is, which of the following is true about Strobilanthes kuntiyana? Okay, that is what the question is. Okay, Reshma Bhanu, please at the bottom of your screen, okay, click on audio and then click on device audio. You will be able to hear me because the other 276 people are absolutely hearing me clearly. So make sure that you do that and then you will be able to hear also. Okay, so the question is, which of the following statement is true about Strobilanthes kuntiyana? Okay, your options are: this plant flowered during September to October 2006. Its mass flowering transformed large tracts of hilly areas in Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu to blue stretches. It flowers once in 12 years. Then your last option is all of the above. Okay, that is what your last option is. Okay, so I hope all of you have read the question very carefully. Okay, some of you are already popping in with the answer. So then let's have a vote then. Seems like all of you have read the question carefully. All of you seem confident about your answers also. Okay, the poll is live on your screen. Please make sure that you get your votes in. The poll is live on your screen. Please make sure that you get your votes in. Okay. Okay, the poll is live on your screen. So far, 182 out of 280 people have voted. If the other people can get their votes in, that would also be very nice. Okay, 10 seconds and I'll close the poll. 10 seconds and I'll close the poll. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's stop. So, okay, so according to 77% of you, that is 173 people think that option D is correct. And option D is absolutely correct. Option D is the correct answer here. If you remember, all the above statements are traits of Strobilanthes kuntiyana. Okay, that is, it flowered during September to October 2006. If somebody asks you when did it last flower, it flowered in 2018. Okay, and then whenever it flowers, it covers large tracts of hilly areas in Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. I told you that you guys can see it in the Nilgiris portion of Karnataka if you really want to go for it. And then it flowers once in 12 years. Okay, okay. So that was just a couple of revision questions that I wanted to get. Now, let's not waste any more time. Let's directly jump into it. So those of you who have joined today, those of you who are new to the class, it's your first class. Okay, if you have any doubts, you can let me know your doubts in the chat. Okay, and whenever I feel like, so whenever I'm done with the topic, I'll help you with your doubts. Okay, so if you have any doubts at any point, just let me know. Clear? Okay, so let's start with our lesson then. Let's start with our lesson. Okay, so sexual reproduction, we have already discussed the definition of sexual reproduction. What is sexual reproduction? So sexual reproduction involves fusion of gametes and usually involves two parents, right? Check it. Now, the events during sexual reproduction can be classified into 3 stages. Okay, the events during sexual reproduction can be classified into 3 stages. The 3 stages that we have are your pre-fertilization events, then post-fertilization events, sorry, pre-fertilization, then fertilization, and post-fertilization events. So all the events that we'll be studying today, they can be classified into three categories. Okay, what are your three categories? Your three categories are pre-fertilization, that means whatever happens before fertilization. Then you have fertilization, where the fusion of the gamete takes place. And lastly, you have post-fertilization events, that is events that take place after your fusion of the gametes, after your fertilization of the gametes. So these are the three events in which all the topics that we'll be studying today can be classified into. Gladiator, could you please change your name to the original name here? I will not be able to address you if you not change your name to the original name. Okay, please do not have all those fancy names. Okay, this is not YouTube, this is not Snapchat. Okay, have your proper name. It helps me in addressing you properly, plus it gives me a sense of who exactly you are. Okay, take it. So let's move forward then. Let's start with your pre-fertilization events. Let's start with your pre-fertilization events. So what are pre-fertilization events? So pre-fertilization events are those events, okay, which are prior to the fusion of male and female gametes. So these are events of sexual reproduction that take place prior to fusion of male and female gametes. Prajwal, yes, today I would like to finish off the chapter, okay, because I was allotted four lectures for this chapter. So I would like to finish this off today. Okay. So there are two events that take place in pre-fertilization events. Okay. There are two events that take place in pre-fertilization category. The two events are, okay, the two events are gametogenesis and gamete transfer. The two events are gametogenesis and gamete transfer. These are the two things that need to take place before the fusion of the gamete takes place. That is why these two are included in the category of pre-fertilization events. Okay, what is gametogenesis, what is gamete transfer? By name it's very obvious, but anyway we'll be studying them in a bit more detail. Okay, so what are pre-fertilization events? Pre-fertilization events are those events which take place prior to fusion of gametes. And what are the things that need to take place prior to fusion of gametes? Okay, they are gametogenesis and gamete transfer. So these are the two events that take place prior to fusion of your gametes, and hence they are under the category of pre-fertilization events. Okay, let's move forward then. Now, what is gametogenesis? Okay, genesis, wherever you see here the word genesis, genesis means to form. Okay, so gametogenesis means what? Gametogenesis is the process of formation of gametes. So gametogenesis is the process of formation of gametes. Okay, and gametes are haploid cells. Gametes are haploid cells. What do I mean by the term haploid? What do I mean by the term haploid? Jaldi se bata do beta. What do I mean by the term haploid? What do I mean by the term haploid? What do I mean by the term haploid? Again, so haploid is, okay, basically in layman terms, if you have to explain what is haploid, haploid is half the number of chromosomes that are usually present. Half the number of chromosomes that are usually present in a cell, right? As most of you are saying, it is, the condition N. 2N is your diploid, N is your haploid. So half the number of chromosomes that are usually present is known as haploid. Okay, so gametes are haploid cells, right? For example, in human beings, our normal cells contain 46 chromosomes. So our gametes contain 23 chromosomes. So gametes are haploid. Okay, check it. Now, gametes are classified into two categories based on their similarities. Gametes are classified into two categories based on their similarities. Okay, so the two categories are homogametes and heterogametes, right? The two categories are homogametes and heterogametes. So what is gametogenesis? Gametogenesis is the process of formation of gametes. Gametes are haploid cells, and based on their similarities, gametes are classified into homogametes and heterogametes. Okay, and again, as the name might suggest, homogametes and heterogametes, I think all of you can figure out, but still we'll see what exactly are homogametes and heterogametes. Okay, now let's see. So when two gametes are similar in appearance, when two gametes are similar in appearance, that it is not possible to categorize them into male and female gametes, then they are called homogametes or isogametes. As you can see in the figure, you cannot tell which one is male and which one is female, right? So this is a condition of homogametes or isogametes. Okay, this is a condition of homogametes or isogametes. Your examples are Claudophora and Eulothrix. Please remember the examples. These examples have been asked again and again in the exam. So what are homogametes or isogametes? When you cannot distinguish morphologically just by looking at them which one is male gamete, which one is female gamete, then this is known as homogametes or isogamete. Okay, this condition is also known as isogamy. Okay, examples are Claudophora and Eulothrix. Okay, again, if at any point you cannot understand anything, let me know in the chat. I will help you through it. So that is what your homogametes are. Okay, unable to distinguish between them morphologically. Just by looking at them, you cannot tell which one is male and which one is female. That is what your homogametes or isogametes are. Now, what are heterogametes? When the gametes are of two morphologically dissimilar types, then they are known as heterogametes. Example, fucus and humans, right? So in the figure given below, you can see that just by looking at them, you can tell which one is a female gamete, which one is a male gamete. So the figure is of gametes of fucus. So as you can see that the female gamete is bigger and the male gamete is smaller. Same goes for humans, right? In humans, the male gamete is smaller, that is the sperm is smaller, and your female gamete, the egg, the ovum is bigger in size. Okay. Now, next point, in such organisms, the male gamete is called antherozoid or sperm. What is the male gamete called? Antherozoid or sperm. I am pretty sure all of you know what sperm are. Make sure that you remember what are antherozoids also, right? Because in the exam, instead of giving the term sperm, they might give you the term antherozoid. So make sure that you mention, that you remember both of them. Okay. And the female gamete is called egg or ovum. I think this is clear to all of you. All of you know that the female gamete is known as egg or ovum. Just remember that the alternate name for sperm is antherozoid. So what is isogamy or isogametes? When both the gametes are morphologically similar and you cannot differentiate between the two. In your heterogametes, the gametes are morphologically different. And you can distinguish which one is male and which one is female. And as Charnish has pointed out, you can also call them anisogametes, right? So isogametes are similar. You can also call them anisogametes. Okay? So in anisogamy or in heterogametes, the male gamete is known as antherozoid or sperm, and the female gamete is known as egg or ovum. Okay? Now let's move forward to the next one. Okay? Nandita, could you please elaborate? Then I'll discuss. So that is much more specific here. In general, we cannot call it. Okay? Now, let's move forward. So gametes are always haploid. And doesn't matter whether the structures or the cells that are producing them are haploid or diploid, right? So they are always haploid, irrespective of the fact from the place where they being produced, whether that is haploid or diploid, right? So for example, spores are produced in sporangia, right? So the gametes will always be haploid. It doesn't matter whether the place where they being produced are diploid or haploid, but the gametes are always haploid in nature. Okay. So if the structure which is haploid, then the structure gives rise to gamete by mitosis. If the structure is diploid, then it gives rise to gamete via meiosis. Remember that. Okay. So the structure that is producing gamete can be diploid or haploid, but the gametes are always haploid. If the structure is diploid, meiosis will take place. Why? Because meiosis is known as reductional division. And if the structure is haploid, then it will undergo mitosis to produce gametes. Why? Because the mitosis is also known as equational division. Okay? Okay? Beta, haploid is half the number of chromosomes that are usually present. Okay, that is what haploid is. So human beings are diploid organisms because we have two set of each chromosome. Okay, two set of each chromosome. Okay. Again, Nandita, as I said, archegonium is very specific to plants. Okay, so we do not use that term when it comes to humans. That is why you cannot call it archegonium specific. Okay. Okay. So next is the structure formed by fusion of gametes is always diploid. That is, when a male and a female gamete fuses, whatever you end up, the zygote that you end up with is always diploid. Okay, is always diploid. Okay. Okay. Yes, Pritish. Okay. So the structure formed by fusion of gametes is always diploid. Now, how is the chromosome number maintained then? Chromosome number is maintained by meiosis. Chromosome number is maintained by meiosis. A classic example, human beings are 46. Human beings have 46 chromosomes in each of their cells, and their progeny still end up with 46, despite the fact that we need a cell from the male, that is your sperm. We need a cell from the female, which is your egg. And the two of them fuse together to give rise to zygote. And that zygote still has 46 chromosomes. Why? Because during gamete formation, meiosis takes place. Right? So meiosis is something that happens in the life of all sexually reproducing organisms. Where it happens, that can be different. Okay, that is something we'll study in a minute or so. But chromosome number is maintained by meiosis, and it occurs in the life of all sexually reproducing organisms. Okay. Okay. Now, gamete producing cells which undergo meiosis are called meiocytes, or gamete mother cells, or gamete mother cells. Okay. So the cells which are responsible for production of gametes are known as what? They are known as meiocytes. Okay. The cells which are responsible for production of gametes which undergo meiosis are known as meiocytes. So remember what is meiocytes. This is very important. So meiocytes are gamete producing cells which undergo meiosis. Veerbhadra, I will be uploading these notes on the group. You can download it from there. Do not worry. Okay, do not focus on taking screenshots here. The entire notes as it is, I'll upload it. So I hope this is now clear to everybody. Again, if at any point it is not clear to everybody, just let me know. Okay, just give me a yes if this is clear to everybody. Just give me a yes if so far whatever we have studied, that is clear to everybody. Okay. Varsha, you want me to explain the last 2 points? Beta dekho. Last 2 points में क्या बोल रहा है? Meiosis is something that happens in life of all sexually reproducing organism. So if you see a sexually reproducing organism, in that organism you will see meiosis. Whether that meiosis happens to produce gametes, whether that meiosis happens after zygote formation, okay, it depends from organism to organism. ये थोड़ा देखेंगे. Okay. The last point says that cells which give, so for example in humans, okay, in humans, for example in males, okay, for example in males, there are cells which give rise to sperms. Okay, sperms do not magically appear, right? Sperms are produced from certain cells. So those cells from which gametes are produced are known as meiocytes or gamete mother cells Okay, the first point author states that gametes are always haploid. That is, gametes contain always half the number of chromosomes than what usually is present in the organism. Okay, but the structure from which they are being produced can be haploid or diploid. Okay. Okay. Vasu, just check your internet connection once here because nobody else is pointing that error out. So just check that. Okay. Check it. Now, as I said, meiosis takes place in all sexually reproducing organisms. Okay. But that meiosis can happen at different places. Okay. For example, in humans and in other animals, meiosis takes place while gamete formation. But there are some organisms in which meiosis takes place after zygote formation. There are some organisms in which meiosis takes place while producing spores. So the meiosis can take place at different stages. Okay. So on the basis of the stage at which meiosis occurs, the meiosis is of 3 types. What are the 3 types of meiosis that we'll study? Zygotic meiosis, sporic meiosis, and gametic meiosis. Okay. So the meiosis can occur at any of these 3 levels. It can either occur during gamete formation, it can either occur after formation of zygote, or it can occur for formation of spores. So depending on where meiosis occurs in gametogenesis, okay, or in the life of a sexually reproducing organism, the meiosis can be of 3 types: zygotic meiosis, sporic meiosis, and gametic meiosis. I hope this is clear to everybody. Okay, let's see all 3 of these types of meiosis. Now, let's first talk about zygotic meiosis and gametic meiosis. So, zygotic meiosis occurs in zygote producing haploid organisms. Okay, zygotic meiosis occurs in zygote producing haploid organisms. So when there are haploid organisms, right? So for example, this is a hypothetical example. This is not a true example. This is a hypothetical example. For example, there are organisms in which there are 10 chromosomes. Right? So what they do is that when they produce gametes, they produce their gametes by mitosis. So their gametes still contain 10 chromosomes. Their gametes still contain what? They still contain 10 chromosomes. And when these two gametes fuse, they give rise to a zygote which will contain what? 20 chromosomes. But 20 is more than what they usually have. Usually they have 10 chromosomes. So what happens is that this zygote will now undergo meiosis to produce offsprings which contain 10 chromosomes each. And this is what zygotic meiosis is all about. Okay, so in zygotic meiosis, the zygote contains double the number of chromosomes that is usually present in the parent body. So the zygote undergoes meiosis. Okay, the zygote undergoes meiosis and it produces offsprings which contain the same number of chromosomes as the parent cells. So these are your parent cells. Okay, so these are your parents. Then this is your gametes. Then this is your zygote, and these are your offsprings. Okay, so this is what zygotic meiosis is all about. In zygotic meiosis, what happens is meiosis takes place after zygote formation. Beta, Rohan, if you remember, in meiosis, we end up with 4 daughter cells, right? In 4 daughter cells, all of them contain half the number of chromosomes that the parent cell, right? That is why we have 4 cells of 10 chromosomes, right? So is zygotic meiosis clear to everybody? Just give me a yes or no. Is zygotic meiosis clear to everybody? Just give me a yes or no. So in organisms in which you see zygotic meiosis, okay, the gamete formation takes place by mitosis. But once zygote has formed, then meiosis takes place to give rise to offspring that has the same number of chromosomes as your parent, which in this case was 10. This is a hypothetical example. Yeah, this is not okay. This is a hypothetical example. I'm not sure whether there's an organism which has 10 chromosomes, right? So that is what zygotic meiosis is all about. Okay, I'll repeat again once more, then I'll move forward. So in zygotic meiosis, the zygote contains double the number of chromosomes as the parent. As you can see here, that the zygote contains 20 chromosomes, but the parent had 10 chromosomes each. So the zygote undergoes meiosis. Okay. So the zygote undergoes meiosis, okay, to produce, okay, so zygote undergoes meiosis to produce offsprings, that have half the number of chromosomes as the zygote, but the same number of chromosomes as the parent. Okay. It seems like a lot of you, Pranav, this is not a theory, beta, this happens. It's not a theory, this happens. Okay. So it seems like a lot of you, oh my God. Okay. Beta, a lot of you, I think, are confused about meiosis. If you remember, in meiosis, what happens is, in meiosis, one cell which contains, let's say, 2n chromosomes gives rise to 4 cells of n chromosomes. A lot of you are confused. Sir, 20 se 40, 10, 4 add ke to 40 hona chahiye 20. Beta, go back to meiosis. In meiosis, what happens, right? Meiosis, the number of chromosomes get half, and you get 4 daughter cells, right? So do not go, ye to 10 hai, ye to 40 hona chahiye. Why is it 20? Beta, if you remember meiosis clearly, right? In meiosis, what happens is, for example, in humans, one cell which contains 46 chromosomes give rise to 4 daughter cells which contain 23 chromosomes each, right? अगर तुम उन सारे 23 को add करोगे, that will add up to 92, not 46. But in meiosis, if you remember one, meiosis 1, then meiosis 2, right? So that is how it is. Okay, so it's very important to make sure that your concepts are 11th are absolutely clear because we'll be needing them in this. Okay, okay, okay. Pratibha, this is here what we are talking about, the kind of meiosis. Here what we are talking about is the kind of meiosis that we see. Obviously, zygotic meiosis is a post-fertilization event, but this is, we are just now right now talking about the kind of meiosis that exists. So now I hope that zygotic meiosis is clear to everybody. Okay, now in gametic meiosis, okay, in gametic meiosis, what happens is the germinal cells means what? The gamete mother cells, okay, or meiocytes are diploid and they undergo meiosis to produce haploid gametes. So this is something that takes place in most of the animals. This is something that takes place in most of the animals. Okay, so in humans also we have meiocytes which contain 46 chromosomes, and each of those meiocytes give rise to 4 sperm which contains 23 chromosomes each. So in gametic meiosis, which is the most common form of meiosis, meiosis takes place during gamete formation. Okay, make sure that you remember the examples of zygotic meiosis also. Okay, so what is zygotic meiosis? In zygotic meiosis, the meiosis takes place after zygote formation, okay, because the zygote contains double the number of chromosomes that a normal parent cell contains. Okay, so examples for zygotic meiosis are Chlamydomonas and Eulothrix. Okay, Pranav, I don't know who discovered this process. I think you're the same Pranav who has troubled me for the last 2 years, right? Anyway, so gametic meiosis. What is gametic meiosis? So in gametic meiosis, the meiosis takes place during gamete formation. What is the example? In most of the animals, right? Then in those animals, gametic meiosis takes place. That is, gamete formation takes place. Sorry, meiosis takes place during gamete formation. Okay, humans, cat, dogs, elephants, deers. In all those, during gamete formation, you see meiosis. Shashwat, it's okay. Stay back after the class. I'll explain it again. Do not worry. Okay, let's move forward. So that is what zygotic and gametic meiosis is. Now, next is sporic meiosis. So what is sporic meiosis? So sporic meiosis occurs inside sporangia and it produces haploid spores. Okay, so this is your sporangia and it undergoes meiosis to produce your haploid spores. It undergoes meiosis to produce your haploid spores. As you can see, meiosis is taking place. On germination, haploid spores, which are also known as meiospores, produce haploids body called gametophytes. As you can see, these spores give rise to your individual gametophytes. As you can see, these spores, which are also known as meiospores, produce haploid bodies called gametophytes. Haploid bodies called gametophytes. Okay, and the gametes are produced in gametophytes through mitosis. The gametes are produced in gametophytes through mitosis. Okay, so what happens in sporic meiosis? Spores are formed in sporangia using meiosis to produce haploid spores. On germination, haploid spores produce haploid bodies which are known as gametophytes. The spores are haploid and they produce haploid bodies. So remember that your sporangia is usually diploid. Okay, your sporangia is usually diploid and your haploid and your gametophytes are haploid. So when sporangia gives rise to haploid spores, it uses meiosis. And when haploid bodies give rise to gametophytes, they use mitosis. Okay, and the gametes come together to form a zygote. The zygote gives rise to sporangia, and then the entire process repeats again. Sporangia, meiosis, spores, gametophytes, mitosis, gametes, zygote, sporangia. Okay? Okay, that is how it is. So is this clear to everybody? Give me a yes or no. Is sporic meiosis clear to everybody? Is sporic meiosis clear to everybody? Just give me a yes or no. Sporic meiosis clear to everybody? Okay, chalo, I'll explain it once again. Yeah, I'll explain it once again. Okay, I'll explain it once again. Why are they called so? Yeah, I am not sure. Why are they called so? I'm not sure. Okay, so let's look at it. Okay, okay. So if you're asking why are the gametics, yeah. So why are the spores called meiospores? Because beta they are produced as a result of meiosis. That is why they are called meiospores. Dekho, first thing is spore. Okay, sporangia. Sporangia is diploid. Sporangia is diploid, and sporangia is diploid, and it gives rise to haploid spores by meiosis. Now, haploid spores, they give rise to your individual gametophytes. They give rise to your individual gametophytes. Okay, male gametophyte or female gametophyte. Male and female gametophytes are your haploid in nature. They give rise to your gametes, which are also haploid by mitosis. So during spore formation, there is meiosis. During gamete formation, there is mitosis. Then the gametes come together. Then the gametes come together and form a zygote, which gives rise to a sporangia or a sporophyte. Okay. Now I hope this is now clear to everybody. Okay, so there are like 4 or 5 people to whom it was not clear. Now I hope this is clear to everybody. Okay. Okay, one last time समझा रहा हूँ बेटा. उसके बाद if it's still not clear, stay back after the class. I'll explain again. Sporangia is diploid. Sporangia is diploid. Okay, sporangia is diploid. Then what happens is it gives rise to your spores using meiosis. That is why these spores are called your meiospores. Your spores are haploid. They give rise to haploid gametophytes. They give rise to haploid gametophytes. Okay. Then what happens is your haploid gametophytes give rise to gametes using mitosis. So during spore formation, there is meiosis. During gamete formation, there is mitosis. Right? Why is there meiosis during spore formation? Why is there meiosis during? Beta explain kar raha hu. Kishore, dhyan se suno. Why is there meiosis during spore formation? Because the sporophyte is diploid. Because the sporophyte or the sporangia is diploid. That is why during spore formation, you see meiosis. Okay, you see meiosis. But once those spore give rise to gametophytes, they give rise to gamete using mitosis because the gametophytes are haploid. So they use mitosis to give rise to haploid gametes. Haploid gametes come together to form a zygote. Zygote gives rise to a diploid sporophyte. I hope now this is now clear to everybody. Check it. Okay. If it's still not clear, please stay back after the class. I'll explain it again. Do not worry. Check it. Okay. So that is what your sporic meiosis is. So we studied zygotic meiosis. Meiosis takes place after your zygote formation. Gametic meiosis takes place during gamete formation, right? And then what happens is, after that what happens is your sporic meiosis. And sporic meiosis takes place during spore formation. Meiosis takes place during spore formation, not during gamete formation. Okay? Athar, stay back after the class. We'll discuss it then. Now, a table which is given in your textbook, and obviously none of you will pay attention to it, so I have to bring your attention. Okay, I have to bring your attention to this. Okay, so what I'll do is I will fill the second column. I'll fill the second column, that is chromosome number in meiocytes. I'm pretty sure that you can fill the chromosome number in gamete, because chromosome number in gamete, okay, in most of these organisms is half of it. Okay, so let's look at it. Okay, so housefly chromosome number is, okay, your chromosome number is in meiocytes is 12. So how many chromosomes will be there? How many chromosomes will be there in gamete of a housefly? How many chromosomes number will be there in gamete of a housefly? It will be 6. It will be 6. Okay, so now how many chromosome number will be there in meiocytes of rat? How many chromosome numbers will be there in meiocytes of rat? In meiocytes of rat, we will have how many? Double of 21, which is 42. Now, in dog, it is 78 chromosomes. So what is half of 78? Half of 78 is what? 39. So, okay, make sure that you fill this table in your textbook, yeah. Make sure that you fill this table in your textbook. Okay. Now, after that, in cat, there are 19 chromosomes in gamete. So in meiocytes, how many will there be? In meiocytes, there will be 38. Again, what are meiocytes? Meiocytes are cells that give rise to your gamete. Okay. Now, in fruit fly, there are 8 in meiocytes. So how many will be there in gametes? In gametes, there will be now. In Ophioglossom, there are 630 chromosomes in the 630 chromosomes there. So on this side, how many will you have? In this side, you will have 1, 2, 6, 1, 2, 6, 0, 1, 2, 6, 0. Okay. Now, after that, apple has 34 chromosomes in the neocytes. So there it will have how many? In gametes, it will have 17 chromosomes. In rice, so what will you write here? Double of 12 is what? Double of 12 is 24. What is half of 20? Half of 20 is 10. That is what you'll write here. I hope that you can fill out the rest of the table also. Okay. Make sure that you remember this table. Okay. As I said, anything that's part of your textbook can be asked in the NEET exam. So make sure that you remember this table. Okay. Make sure that you remember the number of chromosomes in meiocytes, because if you remember the number of chromosomes in the meiocyte, obviously you can easily figure out chromosome number in gametes. Okay. So make sure that you remember this table at any cost. The table is important. Okay. So now let's move forward. Let's move forward to the next one. Okay. So now, organisms are classified into two categories based on whether they have both the sexes on them or only a single one. So in plants, okay, plants are known as bisexual or monoecious if they have both male and reproductive structures, and they are known as unisexual or dioecious if they are on different plants. All of you know this. There is nothing new here. Okay. If there is nothing new there. Pritish, as I said, make sure that you remember it, because an exam, they might not give any of them. Okay. Now, next is in flowering plants, the unisexual male flower is called what? Staminate. Okay. Why is it called staminate? Because it bears a stamen. It bears a what? Stamen, which is responsible for production of your pollen grains. Now, and the female is called pistillate because it bears pistil. So what is the male flower called? The male flower, the unisexual male flower is called staminate, and the unisexual female flower is called pistillate. It's called staminate because it bears stamen, and it's called pistillate because it bears pistil. Okay? And plants which contain both sexes are known as bisexual or monoecious. If the sexes are present on separate, then they are called unisexual or dioecious. Then they're called unisexual or dioecious. Can you guys give me examples of monoecious plants? Can you guys give me examples of monoecious plants? Examples of monoecious plants. You guys might have studied in 11th standard. Examples of monoecious plants. So, okay. Chicken. Okay, most of the examples that you guys are saying are correct. So, I have just picked up a couple of examples. So, examples of monoecious plants are your, okay, cucurbits and coconut. Then you can include hibiscus also. Okay. And for dioecious plants, there is papaya and date plant. For dioecious plant, there is papaya and date plant. So make sure that you remember them. Okay. So again, there are multiple examples. I have just picked two of these examples. I just picked two of these, two examples of both of them. Obviously, there are hundreds of examples for both of them. I picked these, I think, from your textbook itself. Okay. So just make sure that you remember 2 to 3 examples of monoecious as well as dioecious plant. Okay. Now, next is in several plants and fungi, homothallic and monoecious are used to denote bisexual conditions. So if you see homothallic also means bisexual. Okay. Do not get confused if you see homothallic. Homothallic also means monoecious or bisexual, and heterothallic means dioecious. Okay. To represent unisexual condition. So if you see homothallic, that means the same as monoecious or your bisexual condition. If you see heterothallic, that is the same as your dioecious or unisexual. So do not get confused if you see homothallic or heterothallic. Okay, it's very important to remember alternate names of each term, because in exam they can use any one of those terms. So if you do not know that particular term, then you might get confused in the question. So homothallic means bisexual condition or monoecious condition, and heterothallic means dioecious condition or unisexual condition. Okay, let's move forward then. So now we are done with gamete synthesis. Okay, so after that, gametes have been synthesized. Now the next point, the next part is to transport the gametes, right? Because obviously the gametes have to be transported from one organism to the other. So In most organisms, male gamete is motile and the female gamete is non-motile. Okay, there in male gamete is motile and the female gamete is non-motile. Male gamete is motile and the female gamete is non-motile. But there are few fungi and algae where both types of gametes are motile. Where both types of gametes are motile. So I'm pretty sure that you guys can tell me. I'm pretty sure that you guys can tell me examples in which male gamete is motile and female gamete is non-motile, right? The most famous example is humans, right? In humans, the sperm is motile and the female is non-motile, right? Can you guys give me an example in which both are motile? Can you guys give me an example in which both are motile? Can you guys give me an example in which both are motile? Okay, so the first one is also known as, the first condition is also known as oogamy. The first condition is also known as oogamy, where the ovum is non-motile. That is known as oogamy. So can anybody give me an example where your both the gametes are motile? So the example, a very classic example for that is Chlamydomonas. Okay, so in Chlamydomonas, both the gametes are motile. Male and female, both the gametes are motile. Okay, so the first condition is known as oogamy, where your both the gametes, where your male gamete is motile and the female gamete is non-motile. Okay, and examples of organisms in which both are motile. One of the classic example is Chlamydomonas. Okay, in which both are motile because of the presence of flagella. Because of the presence of flagella. Okay, so that is one way of gamete transfer. Now, some organisms also depend on external medium for gamete transfer, right? So now in plants like algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, water is the medium through which gamete transfer takes place. So in algae, pteridophytes, bryophytes, water is used for transportation of gametes, right? In plants, if you look at it, in plants they use insects to transfer the gametes. They can use wind also to transfer the gametes, right? So a medium is required by organisms, by certain organisms, especially plants, to transfer gametes from one organism to another. Okay, so in algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, water is the medium through which gamete transfer takes place. Okay, now next is, but there are certain disadvantages of this also, because a large number of male gametes, however, fail to reach the female gametes, right? Since they're using an external external medium. Okay, there is loss of male gametes. A lot of male gametes are lost in the transportation process. A lot of male gametes are lost in the transportation process, and to compensate this, loss of male gametes, the number of male gametes produced is several thousand times the number of female gametes produced. Okay, to compensate for this, the number of male gametes is much more than the number of female gametes, because the male gametes have to move through the medium to reach the female gamete. Okay, so if somebody asks you a question, okay, so this can be asked as an assertion and reasoning question, right? So they can give you an assertion. Okay, in algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, the male produce large number of male gametes. Then they can give you a reason. Okay, during transportation, a lot of male gametes are lost. So then they can give you the four options. Assertion and reason both are true, and reason is the correct explanation. Assertion and reasoning both are true, reason is not the correct explanation. Assertion is true, reason is not, both of them are false. So this can be asked as an assertion and reasoning question. So why do plants produce a lot of male gametes? Because a lot of them are lost during the transportation process. So to make up for this loss, they produce male gametes in large number. Okay, now in plants, the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma of the female organ through the process of pollination. So what is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of male gametes from your anther to the stigma. That is what pollination is. Okay, Sanjana, as I said, algae, pteridophytes, bryophytes, and also plants, they produce a lot of male gametes, because male gametes have to travel through a medium, and during the process they get lost. So to make up for this loss, they are produced in large number. Okay. Okay. Now, in unisexual animals, male and female gametes are formed in different individuals. Therefore, organisms have developed a special mechanism for gamete transfer. For example, in humans, there is penis. Penis is responsible for transferring the male gametes from the male to the females, right? So most all the animals have specialized organs for delivery of gametes from the male to the female. Okay, done. I hope this is clear to everybody. Now let's move to the next one. Check it. So what is fertilization? What is fertilization? Simple. Fertilization is fusion of gametes to form a diploid zygote. Another name for fertilization is syngamy. Please do not get confused if they use syngamy instead of fertilization. Okay, syngamy and fertilization can be used interchangeably. Both of them mean fusion of gametes. Okay. Fertilization can occur in external medium or inside the organism. So fertilization can occur outside the organism or it can occur inside the organism. Okay, so that means they are classified as external fertilization and internal fertilization. Okay, that means fertilization can be characterized as external and internal. Yes, Reshma Bhanu, you can stay back after the class. Okay, now let's look at external fertilization. So in external fertilization, as the name suggests, fertilization happens outside the parent body. Okay, when fertilization occurs outside the parent organism, it is called external fertilization or external syngamy. It is called external fertilization or external syngamy. In the photo that you see, so those are eggs of aquatic animals, right, which are present outside the female body, and the males will drop their sperms on these eggs, and there will be fertilization outside the organism. Okay, but if syngamy does not happen, the male and the female gamete will degrade. They have a shelf life. If syngamy does not happen, in a brief period of time, they degrade. Okay, now it generally occurs in aquatic medium. Common examples are algae, fishes, and amphibians. Okay, okay. Now couple of more things about external fertilization. Organisms exhibiting external fertilization show great synchrony between the sexes and release a large number of gametes into the surrounding in order to enhance the chance of syngamy. Let's first try to understand the meaning of the first statement. That is this one. That is they exhibit synchrony. What does that mean? They exhibit synchrony. What does that mean? It means that what does it mean? It means that since both the gametes have a shelf life, right? Both the gametes can only survive for a limited amount of time, right? So if let's say female ने आज eggs छोड़ दिए and male is coming 1 week later, कि चलो now I will go and drop my sperms, right? So by that time, if he does that, the eggs will already not be viable. Okay, eggs will not be viable anymore. So there is synchrony between them. That is, both of them release their gametes almost simultaneously, so that their active period overlap as much as possible. As much as possible. Okay. Grace, beta, eggs are formed within the female, then eggs are released by the female in the outside medium, and then the male drop their eggs over the female eggs. Sorry, the males drop their sperm over the female eggs, right? Okay. So what does the second one say? Since both of them, okay, so here you have to see, since both of them are releasing their gametes out in the outside medium, here both of them produce large number. Here both of them produce large number of gametes because both of them are transferring or delivering their gametes in the external medium. So here both male and female gametes are produced in very large numbers. Okay. Now, what is the major disadvantages? Major disadvantage of this type of fertilization is that the offspring are not protected from the predators and their survival is threatened upon adulthood. So since they're out in the open, there is nothing to protect them from predators. That is one major disadvantage of external fertilization, along with the fact that the chances of fertilization are less, right? Because the gametes get lost in the medium in which the fertilization is taking place. Done? Okay, so that was your external fertilization. What is internal fertilization? सबको पता है. Internal fertilization is fusion of gametes inside the body of the female. Inside the body of the female. Abhishek, disadvantage क्या है बेटा? The disadvantage is that the zygotes are naked. There is nothing to protect the zygotes, so they are vulnerable to the parents. Predators. They are vulnerable to the predators. Okay. Now, internal fertilization is the beta disadvantages is what? Disadvantages का मतलब यार not advantages. Okay. अब चंद्रशेखर आएंगे, चिंता मत करो, उस पे भी आएंगे यार, चिंता मत करो, सब पढ़ाऊंगा मैं. Okay. Now, internal fertilization is fusion of gametes inside the female body. Inside the female body. Okay. Here, male gamete is mobile and has to reach the egg in order to fuse with it. So in internal fertilization, the male gamete is motile. Okay. The number of sperms produced is very large, but there is reduction in the number of eggs produced. Since only the sperms have to travel, the sperms are produced in large number, but since the egg does not need to travel, the egg is not produced in large number. Okay? Because the sperms can be lost during the transportation process. So sperms are produced in large number, but eggs are not, because eggs do not need to travel. So that is what your internal fertilization is. That is what your internal fertilization is. Now, let's talk about post-fertilization events. Okay, let's talk about post-fertilization events. Beta, why egg produce gets degenerated? Because every cell has a shelf life. Yeah, right. Every cell has a shelf life. Plus, egg is not that capable. Egg has a very limited storage of energy that it can bank upon. Right. So after a certain point of time, it degenerates because it does not have any more way. It does not have any way to sustain its own survival. So that is why it degenerates. Beta, आऊँगा उस पे. What is your name? Charane. I will come to it. Yeah, चिंता मत करो. I'll come to it. सब prepare करके रखा है. Do not worry. Okay. ठीक है. Kishore, what is meant by mobile? Beta, mobile means something that we can move, that can move. That is known as mobile. Okay. Now, so post-fertilization events. So post-fertilization events are those events which take place after your fertilization. Okay. So events that take place after fertilization are called post-fertilization events. So they include development in zygote and embryogenesis. So fusion and fertilization gives you zygote. So development of zygote and the embryo are part of your post-fertilization events. Okay. Okay. Pranav, to all your questions. Okay. As we all know, your questions are not relevant to the topic, so we'll discuss them after the class here. Okay. Okay. I missed your questions, but we'll discuss them after the class. Now, what is a zygote? Okay. So diploid zygote is fertilization product in all sexually reproducing organisms. So zygote is always diploid. Okay. Zygote is always diploid. Okay. And it is formed by fusion of the two gametes. So as you can see in the figure here, that is the figure of a zygote. Okay. Now, further development of zygote depends on the type of life cycle of the organism and environmental conditions. Okay. So what is zygote? Zygote is the fusion of male and female gametes, and it is always diploid in nature. But what happens to zygote after that depends on what kind of life cycle the organism has. अभी मुझे बताओ yes or no करके. All of you have studied haplontic, diplontic and haplodiplontic life cycle. Haplontic, diplontic and haplodiplontic life cycle. I'm pretty sure all of you must have studied this in 11th standard, right? Okay, so somebody wants me to repeat the first point again. Okay. So in first point, beta kuch nahi hai, zygote is always diploid. Why is it diploid? Because the male and the female gamete fuse together. So n wahan se aaya, n yahan se aaya, 2n ban gaya. That is how zygote does. British question kya hai dal do beta? So what happens to zygote after that depends on which of those three categories does it fit in. Does it have a haplontic life cycle? Does it have a diplontic life cycle? Does it have a haplodiplontic life cycle? Okay, that is what the fate of the zygote is decided by what kind of life cycle it has. What kind of life cycle it has. Okay. Now, let's see. So let's first talk about haplontic life cycle. Let's first talk about haplontic life cycle. Okay, Athar, is that a question or a statement here? I'm not understanding. No. In many fungi and algae, the zygote develops a thick wall and forms spore called zygospore, which undergoes a period of rest. So what happens is fusion of the gamete gives you zygote. Zygote develops a thick coat, and the zygote is now known as what? Zygospore. Okay. So the zygote is known as what? Zygospore. As you can see here, your zygospore has been formed. Here your zygospore has been formed. Okay. So after that, what happens is it germinates during the next growing season. So whenever the next growing season of that particular algae or fungi is, that is when the zygote will grow. And what will the zygote do? The zygote will undergo meiosis to produce haploid individuals, which lead to a haplontic life cycle. With haplontic life cycle, okay, the parents are haploid, okay, always, and the zygote is briefly diploid, okay, and then it undergoes meiosis to give rise to your haploid parents again. So this is a haplontic life cycle. If you remember your 11th standard lesson, right? So as you can see, this is your zygospore, which is diploid. It underwent meiosis to give rise to your haploid, parents. So this is what haplontic life cycle. So what happens in a haplontic life cycle? In a haplontic life cycle, the zygote undergoes meiosis. It develops a thick coat, and the zygote is known as zygospore. This thick coat allows it to endure the harsh conditions and propagate when the conditions are favorable again. And okay, now, so that is your haplontic life cycle. Now, what happens in a diplontic life cycle? So the diplontic life cycle is something that we see, right? Diplontic life cycle is something that is we see. Okay. Afrin, kind of, not exactly kind of. There are some differences, but for the most part, yes. Now, in most animals, zygote does not rest. That is, as soon as the zygote is formed, it starts dividing. It divides by mitosis first, forming a diploid embryo. Okay, and then the individual, which is also a diploid. So this is something that happens. This is something that happens in us. As soon as the zygote forms, the zygote starts undergoing mitosis. Right? It does not undergo meiosis because we are also diploid. Zygote is diploid, hum bhi diploid, to matlab mitosis hoga. In the previous case, the zygote was undergoing meiosis because the parents are haploid. But in our case, since the parents are also diploid, the zygote does not need to undergo meiosis. It needs to undergo mitosis. Okay? This leads to a diplontic life cycle. In a diplontic life cycle, the parents or the organisms are diploid and they form haploid gametes, which come together to form a zygote. Then the zygote undergoes mitosis. This is what a diplontic life cycle is. In a haplontic life cycle, haploid parents, gametes, zygote diploid ho gaya. So zygote will undergo meiosis to go give rise to your haploid parents again. Okay? I hope this is not clear to everybody. Beta, other zygote in animals is never covered by anything. It just has a plasma membrane around it. It's not covered by anything, right? And fungi and algae, it gets covered by wall, and hence it is known as zygospore. Okay? So I hope these two are clear. Okay, that is first your fate of zygote in a haplontic life cycle, and in this case, fate of a zygote in a diplontic life cycle. Okay. No, Dhanush. Haplontic life cycle is not seen in humans here. Human cannot survive on half the number of chromosomes here. Okay. Now, what happens in a diplohaplontic life cycle? Thoda sa tricky hai. Dhyan denge, samajh aa jayega. Now, in most plants, the zygote first forms an embryo and then the diploid sporophyte. In most plants, the zygote first forms an embryo and then diploid sporophyte. Okay? And then diploid sporophyte. Then the sporophyte has sporangia, where meiosis takes place to form a haploid spores. This is similar. Okay. So what happens is the zygote gives rise to a diploid sporophyte. The diploid sporophyte forms haploid spores using meiosis. and then the haploid spores produce haploid gametophytes, and then the gametes are produced in the gametophytes. This leads to a diplohaplontic life cycle. This leads to a diplohaplontic life cycle. So what happens in diplohaplontic life cycle? Okay, your gametes fuse together to give rise to an embryo, and then the embryo develops into a sporophyte. Sporophyte is diploid. Sporophyte is diploid. So sporophyte undergoes meiosis to produce spores which are haploid. Then the haploid spores come together. Then the haploid spores give rise to your gametophytes, which produce gametes, which then fuse. Next slide में figure है, better समझेगा उससे. Right? Let's look at this figure. If you look at it, so this is your diploid sporophyte. Okay, this is your. So let's start from the zygote. This is your zygote. Your zygote develops into a diploid sporophyte. Diploid sporophyte. Your diploid sporophyte undergoes meiosis. Okay, and then it produces haploid spores. The haploid spores give rise to haploid gametophytes. The haploid gametophytes produce, using mitosis, your haploid gametes. The haploid gametophytes, using mitosis, produce haploid gametes. Haploid gametes fertilize to give rise to a diploid zygote. So as you can see, there is a haploid phase, there is a diploid phase. So this is diplohaplontic life cycle. So this is your diplohaplontic life cycle. Is this clear to everybody? Give me a yes or no, beta. Are all these three fate of zygote clear to everybody? That is, your zygote undergoes meiosis, your zygote undergoes mitosis, and then your fate of zygote in a haplodiplontic life cycle. Is this clear to everybody? Okay. Okay. To summarize, okay, so people want me to summarize. So in the first case, that is in your haplontic life cycle. In your haplontic life cycle, what happens is, in your haplontic life cycle, the zygote undergoes meiosis to produce haploid parents. Dhanush, yes, gametes are formed. मैंने कब कहा बेटा? Sexual reproduction तो gametes तो form होंगे, but the gametes are formed using mitosis, right? So in your first, that is in haplontic life cycle, zygote undergoes meiosis to form your haploid parents. Okay? In diplontic life cycle, zygote undergoes mitosis to produce diploid parents. So zygote पे diploid, parent पे diploid, so meiosis की जरूरत है ही नहीं. Now in haplodiplontic, what happens is, in haplodiplontic or diplohaplontic, whatever you want to call it, there what happens is, okay, what happens there is that, okay, what happens there is that the gametes give rise to your zygote, which is diploid. It gives rise to your sporophyte. It gives rise to your sporophyte, which is also diploid. Sporophyte gives rise to your spores, which are now haploid. So their meiosis takes place. Okay, so the spores gives rise to your gametophytes, which are haploid. Gametophytes give rise to your gametes, which are also haploid. Then the gametes fuse together to give rise to a diploid sporophyte. And process keeps on going. So you see half the life cycle as a haploid organism, half the life cycle as a diploid organism. So this is haplodiplontic or diplohaplontic, whatever you want to call it. Atal, let's discuss after the class. This is not related to the topic, so let's discuss after the class. Okay? So I hope now this is clear to everybody. Okay? I hope this is now clear to everybody. Okay, yes, Dhanush, in haplontic life cycle, gametes are produced by mitosis beta, because the parents themselves are haploid, right? So the gametes are produced using mitosis. Anyway, let's move forward then. Now, what is, so that was your first, that is fate of the zygote. The next is your embryogenesis. So what is embryogenesis? The process of development of embryo from a zygote is called embryogenesis. The process of formation of embryo from zygote is known as embryogenesis. Okay, now what happens during embryogenesis? The zygote undergoes mitotic cell division and cell differentiation. So there is a difference between cell division and cell differentiation. So what is the function of cell division? Cell division increases the number of cells. Cell differentiation helps to form specialized tissues and organs. right? So first what happens, for example, in humans, what happens is once a zygote is formed, the one cell gives rise to two cells, the two cells gives rise to four cells, then they give rise to 8 cells, then 16 cells, then 32 cells. Then what happens is that the cells start taking particular shape according to the organ that they need to form, because the cells on your heart are different than the cells on your arms, the cells on your arms are different than the cells on your skin, right? So what happens is that is known as cell differentiation, that is cell taking a particular form to form a particular organ or a tissue. Beta, morula stage and all that we'll do in human reproduction chapter, not worry about that, right? So that is what happens in embryogenesis. So what is embryogenesis? Embryogenesis is the formation of embryo from the zygote. It's the formation of the embryo from the zygote. So what happens in embryogenesis is, in embryogenesis there is cell division and there is cell differentiation. Cell division increases the number of cells. Cell differentiation gives them a specific shape and function to perform in the growing individual. This is what embryogenesis is. We'll be studying embryogenesis in humans in detail in the 3rd chapter. Okay, done? Okay, let's move forward then. Now, on the basis of development of the zygote, the animals are grouped into oviparous, viviparous, and ovoviviparous. Oviparous, viviparous, and ovoviviparous. Sabko pata hai what is viviparous? In viviparous organisms, the organism gives birth to a young one directly. The organism gives birth to a young one directly. In oviparous, what happens in oviparous, those are egg-laying organisms, right? So land animals such as reptiles and birds, the fertilized eggs are covered by hard calcareous cells. The fertilized eggs are covered by hard calcareous cells. That is, the eggs are made up of calcium and calcium salts. Okay. Okay. Then, what is ovoviviparous? What is ovoviviparous? So in ovoviviparous, what happens is, in ovoviviparous, the female retains the egg inside the body after fertilization and allows the development of the embryo inside the body without providing extra nourishment to the developing embryo, as the placenta is absent. Thoda zyada information ho gaya. So let's try to unpack it. So the difference between oviparous and ovoviviparous is, similarity is both of them produce eggs. Similarity is both of them produce egg. But the difference is that in oviparous, egg lays outside in the environment. Ghosle mein rakh diya, right? They put it on the land and they put it on trees and all that stuff, right? But in ovoviviparous, what happens is, after egg formation, the female holds the egg. The female holds the egg inside its own body. But the female does not provide nourishment. In viviparous, the female provides nourishment with placenta. I hope all of you remember placenta from 10th standard, right? In ovoviviparous, female does not provide nourishment. The organism still derives nourishment from the yolk present in the egg. Okay, so ovoviviparous has similarity to both viviparous and oviparous. The similarity with oviparous is it lays eggs. The similarity with viviparous is that the organism develops inside the mother's womb. The difference with oviparous is that the egg is not laid outside in the environment. The difference with the viviparous is that it does not provide nourishment. In viviparous organism, the mother provides nourishment. In ovoviviparous, the mother does not provide nourishment. The nourishment is derived from the yolk of the egg. The nourishment is provided by the yolk of the egg. Sabko samjha kya? Okay? Now, example, a very good example of this is echidna. Okay, a very good example of this is echidna. Echidna is a mammal, and it is a mammal which lays eggs along with platypus. Okay, then shark is also another example. Then for rattlesnake is another one. That's a good example. Okay, chicken. So, however, the female gives birth to young ones. Examples are sharks and rattlesnake. Examples are shark and rattlesnake. Okay, so that is what the example is. I hope ovoviviparous is clear to everybody. Now, move to the next one. So, in flowering plant, the zygote is formed inside the ovule. 10th standard ka yaad hoga that the pollen grain lands on the stigma, forms a pollen tube, which takes the male germ cell to the ovary, right? And inside the ovary there is ovule where fertilization takes place. So zygote is formed inside the ovule. After fertilization, sepals, petals, and stamen of the flower wither and fall off, right? So after fertilization, what happens is, after fertilization, all the accessories fall off. All the accessories fall off the plant because they are no longer needed, right? They had to serve a particular purpose. They serve their purpose and they are no longer needed. Can you guys give me an example of plant in which sepal remain attached even after fertilization? Can you guys give me an example of plant in which sepals remain attached even after fertilization? Even after fertilization. So actually this is a question posed by your textbook itself. In your textbook itself, there's a question. Can you name a plant in which sepals remain attached after fertilization? Okay, a very good example for that is hibiscus. Okay, in hibiscus, the sepals remain attached even after fertilization. Okay, so that is an example. Obviously, there are other examples also. You can look up it. You can look those up. Okay, now the pistil, however, remains attached to the plant. याद रखना क्या क्या गिर जाता है? Sepals, petals, and stamens fall off, but the pistil remains attached. Where does fertilization takes place? The fertilization of zygote formation takes place inside the ovule. All the accessory parts except for the pistil fall off. Okay. Now, the zygote develops into the embryo and the ovule develops into the seed. What happens to the ovules of the plant? The ovules of the plant develop into the seed. Very important. You should know what happens to different parts of the plant. Okay. Anyway, we will be studying this. We'll be studying this in detail in the next chapter. But still, for the moment, you should know because in chapter test it might be asked. So the ovule develops into the seed. Okay. The ovary develops into the fruit. This is something we studied in 10th standard also. That the ovule develops into the seed. The ovary develops into the fruit, which develops a thick wall called pericarp that is protective in functioning. So the ovary develops a thick protective layer which is known as pericarp, and the function of pericarp is to protect the developing embryo. Okay, and after dispersal, the seeds germinate under favorable conditions to produce new plants. So that is your embryogenesis. In plants. Okay, ovule develops into seed, ovary develops into fruit, and ovary develops a protective layer known as pericarp that protects the developing fruit and the plant. Developing fruit and the seed. Okay, let's move to the last topic of the day. Then we are done with the chapter. So the last topic of the day is parthenogenesis. Okay, so what is parthenogenesis? All of you might know. Parthenogenesis is development of an egg into a complete individual without fertilization. So that is what parthenogenesis is. So when an egg gives rise to an individual directly without the need of a male sperm, that is known as parthenogenesis. Okay, so parthenogenesis is seen in plants also. Parthenogenesis is seen in animals also. So one of the examples is a special type of lizard that is found in US. Okay, so these lizards are all females, and what they do is that they lay eggs and the eggs turn into female directly without fertilization from the male counterpart. So that is what parthenogenesis is, when an egg directly gives rise to an individual. Okay, parthenogenesis in animals was discovered by Charles Bonnet. Very important, remember the name. Okay, Charles Bonnet in 1745 discovered parthenogenesis in animals. Okay, now we have artificially been able to do parthenogenesis in plants also. Ashwin, see, if the organism is developing from the egg, it will only contain the chromosomes from the female part, right? So you can say that in parthenogenesis the offspring is male. At least in this particular species of lizards, the entire species is just female because they lay, the egg is produced and the egg directly gives rise to a new female without fertilization. Okay, and then it occurs in organisms like rotifers, honeybees, and even some lizards and birds. So if birds ka koi example puche where it takes place, then you can say that turkey. Then you can say that it is what? Turkey. Okay, so that is what Narottam, you can kind of say it is asexual reproduction because there is no fusion of gametes, right? But scientists have a difficulty putting them in an asexual reproduction, right? But you can say technically it's a form of asexual reproduction. So Sahana, in these organisms, the evolution is very slow. The evolution is very slow, right? So in parthenogenesis, primarily a female progeny is seen, not a male progeny, right? So that was the last topic of the day. Just give me a minute, beta. Okay, and with that, we end the chapter. With that, we end the chapter. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for your patience. Okay, I hope that you guys like today's class. Okay, yes, Sukanya, we will be studying this in detail in the next chapter. Do not worry about it. We'll be studying this in detail in the next chapter. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed today's class. I hope that you like today's class, right? And I'll see you guys on Thursday. That is when our next class is, right? Okay, Athar, so to answer, I know you have been asking that question, so I'll answer that question, right? So how do variations occur in part? Okay, just stay back for your doubts after the class, then I'll help you with your doubts. Just stay back after the class. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes here. Okay, okay. So I'll end the class. Okay, thank you very much for your patience here. I really enjoy teaching you guys. I hope that you guys also enjoy learning from me. Okay, so I'll see you guys on Thursday. Please take care, everybody. Bye bye.